Friday afternoon, 4:57 in the evening, the time when most people pack their desks, shut their laptops, and think about pizza and quiet. Not me. After 30 years at Northline Systems, I never had what anyone would call a normal Friday. The 15th floor executive suite smelled like expensive cologne and fresh plastic, the scent of people who think they're ushering in a new era. On the desk, a gold-plated clock ticked steadily, like it was counting down to something. And it was. To the final second of my 30-year career. Darren Cole, the new CEO, 38 years old, tie perfect, hair slick, the kind of man who quotes the company slogan like it's philosophy. He turned his coffee cup slowly, the light catching his glasses, every move graceful, confident, hollow. "We're restructuring, Margaret." He paused, his voice heavy with fake regret. "Today will be your last day." The words fell softly, but they hit like steel. The only sounds were the air conditioner humming and papers shifting, and his self-satisfied breathing. I looked at the cup in front of me, just a cold ring of coffee left, the surface trembling as he shut his laptop. A clean, precise, soulless motion, exactly like him. I didn't ask why, didn't beg, didn't cry. All I heard was the click, the system deactivating my employee badge. A small, dry sound, enough to end 30 years. 30 years of night shifts, of pressure valves and near accidents I stayed late to prevent, all wrapped up in one click. I looked him straight in the eye. That Harvard MBA kind of stare, clear, confident, lined to everyone but himself. "You'll regret this, Mr. Cole," I said, calm as if we were talking about the weather. "Not because of me, but because the truth never keeps quiet." He smirked. That "I know the law better than you" grin, the kind that makes you want to pour coffee into a keyboard. I stood, picked up my coat, straightened my cuffs, the reflex of a professional you can't erase after 30 years. He started to speak, probably the ceremonial "I'm sorry," but I was already walking away. I didn't need hollow farewells. The 15th floor hallway gleamed under LED light. My shadow stretched long and steady across the polished floor. The elevator chimed, a soft, tired sigh. As I passed reception, the young clerk whispered, barely louder than the copier, "They shouldn't have done that to you, Mrs. Hale." I stopped and looked at her, and saw myself 30 years ago, a fresh engineer who still believed good work would bring fairness. I smiled. "It's all right, honey. They just fired the calmest person in this company." She smiled back, not quite understanding. "That's fine. Someday, when her silence grows loud enough, she will." The elevator descended slowly. I watched my reflection slide past each floor, a life in reverse. 12th floor, where I once worked the night shift. 8th, where I got promoted. 3rd, where Thomas used to wait for me before he passed. The doors opened. Cold air swept in. The sky over St. Paul was gray, the mist thin as steel dust. I stepped out, holding my badge, its screen blinking red. "Access denied." "Access denied," I whispered, smiling. "Makes sense. Northline never really granted me access. They only needed me." A taxi pulled up. The driver glanced at me in the mirror, weary but kind. "Rough day at work, ma'am?" "Something like that," I said. "They just forgot to say thank you." He chuckled, the kind of laugh only outsiders can afford. I looked out the window. The city kept shining. People kept rushing. No one knew a minor restructuring on the 15th floor had just killed a loyal soul. The car stopped in front of my small house by the lake. I unlocked the door, turned on the light, and made tea. Rituals that keep you awake. On the table sat the 25th anniversary photo, me in the middle of the engineering team, clipboard in hand, eyes straight, confident, a bit stern. Behind me, Thomas, smiling softly. His voice echoed in my mind. "You don't have to speak loudly to be heard. Just do the right thing. They'll fall silent." I nodded. "Yes, Thomas. Maybe it's time to test that again." I sipped my tea. The lamplight caught the silver badge, Northline Systems, gleaming faintly. The name felt foreign now. I set it down. hearing a soft click, as if it knew the game wasn't over. I looked straight at the camera. Have you ever been replaced just because someone was younger, cheaper, or louder? Tell me in the comments, and tell me where you're watching from. I paused, then smiled, the smile of someone who's lost everything, yet still holds the upper hand. Because sometimes all it takes is one small sound to bring down an entire system. When Northline was still a small plant outside St. Paul, I used to run the entire line like a conductor. 3 shifts, 120 workers, hundreds of machines moving like a metal orchestra, every hiss and clang with its own rhythm. All it took was me standing there, hard hat on, clipboard in hand, and everything flowed. No shouting, no orders. They just watched for my nod, and the machines obeyed. Back then, they called me the backbone of the company. A title never printed in any contract, but everyone understood it. Every major decision crossed my desk, from pressure settings to maintenance schedules. If I said no, the line stopped. No one argued, not even the gray-haired supervisors. Now it's different. Now they call me a relic. A word spoken with a friendly smile, but eyes that say it's time for you to leave. On the meeting room wall hang 27 plaques, all men's names. Process Innovation of the Year, Production Efficiency, Technological Contribution. Mine sits at the bottom left corner, dusty and fading. One day I tried to wipe it clean. Didn't even touch it before the young assistant said, "Leave it, ma'am. It looks more vintage that way." Vintage. Me. Vintage. A woman who kept this system alive through crises, budget cuts, and 2 chairmen is now labeled as classic. Sounds elegant, if not for the word outdated hiding inside it. I'm not invisible. They just choose not to see me. I've watched 3 CEOs come and go. Each brought their own slogan: efficiency, speed, growth. None ever came with the word ethics. Maybe that one doesn't look good on a PowerPoint slide. I remember the night I saved the plant from a pressure explosion. Friday night shift, 1:13 in the morning. A faint whistle, one that only years in operations could recognize. I checked the gauge. Pressure is spiking abnormally. I didn't wait for a report. I ordered a full shutdown. The floor went silent, confused. By morning, the engineers confirmed it. 2 more minutes and 20 lives would have been gone. The company sent me flowers and a thank you card. No bonus, no meeting, no mention. 3 months later, they installed an automated monitoring system and called it the Darren Tech Safety Initiative, sponsored by the previous CEO. I saw the project name flash across the screen and smiled. Technology can monitor, but it can't listen. Then Darren arrived, with his smile and shiny words: cost optimization, margin expansion, removing redundancies. In his language, redundancies meant people. Optimization meant skipping what's time-consuming but keeps people safe. The first day I met him, I understood. He wasn't here to build. He was here to sell, not to listen, to perform. He spoke about transforming company culture, while I looked at last quarter's unresolved safety errors. He preached automation while I stared at compressors that hadn't had their safety valves replaced in 14 years. The first time I rejected his plan to cut inspection frequency, he smirked. "Margaret, you know the law only requires periodic checks. You've been doing them monthly. You're doubling our costs." I answered without looking up. "That cost is still cheaper than a life, Mr. Cole." He didn't like that. I saw it in his eyes, the discomfort of a man reminded that profit isn't everything. After the meeting, I caught whispers. "She's stubborn. She's old. Doesn't understand the times." Maybe they were right. I don't understand a world that calls skipping the truth risk management. I still came to the plant every morning at 6, walking past young engineers with earbuds in. No one greeted me. No one needed to. To them, I was just the one who hadn't retired yet. My chair was called the legacy seat. My reports were filed in folders named Legacy, Archive, and Old. Polite words, but I knew, once they add old, they're preparing to delete. Some nights I stayed late, watching the pressure valves glow under the lights like steel fireflies. The company felt like a living creature aging from within, its shell still polished, but its veins corroding. Maybe I was the same, except I knew when to stop. They didn't. One afternoon, Darren walked into the factory with a PR crew. He wore a spotless hard hat labeled Safety First, smiling for photos. I stood in the corner, watching him hold a wrench the wrong way and say, "At Northline, safety is our top priority." I smiled faintly. The coffee cup in my hand trembled with the rhythm of the compressor, the sound I trusted more than my own heartbeat. Top priority, huh? I thought. He'll learn what real priority means soon enough. That night, I opened my drawer and took out a silver hard drive. Not for revenge, just instinct. The instinct of someone who's seen too many reports edited before submission. I placed it on the table and listened to the ticking clock. That steady rhythm felt like both a reminder and a promise. "They think I'm a relic," I whispered. "But if a relic still exists, it means it outlasted all of them." That night, I didn't cry. Tears are a luxury for those who haven't seen too many things collapse and still had to stand up again. I made a cup of black tea and sat at the old desk by the window. Rain brushed softly across Minnesota, the streetlights reflected on the lake, each drop falling steady and precise, like the ticking of the factory clocks. In the drawer, the silver hard drive lay still. I opened it, clicked, and a small sound echoed through the quiet room. Inside were 4 folders I had carefully backed up over the last 4 years. I called it the Silent Archive. The first folder, emails. The warning chains I sent about pressure levels exceeding safety limits, all marked as read, none answered. The second, technical schematics. Blueprints I signed, later modified by the leadership to smooth out the numbers. I kept the originals, a habit born from not trusting system memory. The third, meeting recordings. Darren's voice, crystal clear, every breath audible. "We don't need another inspection. Just sign it. No one will ever check." The last, photos of pressure valves, each one taken by me, date, serial, engineer's signature. Proof no one could deny. I had warned him. I sent memos, attached charts, and wrote in clear technical language. Darren replied with one line. "Work smarter. No need to be that precise. No need to be precise." I remember laughing when I read that. In his world, everything could be approximate, except greed. I opened my personal laptop and logged into an old email address, one only a few friends still remembered. There was one contact I'd never deleted, Greg Whitman, former Northline safety director, now with the Department of Industry. A quiet man who knew the difference between a technical error and a technical crime. I typed a few short lines, as concise as a hazard report. Subject: review needed. Overpressure levels at Northline. You once told me to call when something smelled wrong. Well, it stinks now. I stared at the screen, fingers hovering over send. 1 second? 2. I took a breath, clicked. 1 email, 1 domino. I leaned back in my chair, closed my eyes. The only sound was the soft tapping of rain on the roof, steady as a heartbeat before a storm. I didn't know what would happen next, but I wasn't afraid anymore. Fear had dissolved, leaving only clarity. I opened the old file cabinet and pulled out a cardboard box, scrawled on the lid, for when they forget. Inside were things I'd stored over the years, a report corrected in red ink, a screenshot of an auto-deleted email, a USB containing Darren's recorded safety revision meeting. No one knew I had them. They thought I was blindly obedient, incapable of pushing back. Their biggest mistake was believing silence meant surrender. I remembered once Darren joked to a colleague in front of me, "Margaret talks to machines more than people." He thought it was funny. It was true. Machines don't betray. They remember everything. That night, I turned on my recorder and played back an old meeting. Darren's voice came through, smooth, confident, like a man on stage. "We don't need another inspection. The report will be adjusted accordingly." I sat still, listening to every word, listened until the file ended, then saved it under a new name, proof_01.wiv. Then another, proof_02.wiv. I wasn't rushing. Patience is a weapon too. Around midnight, I poured more tea. cold now, slightly bitter. The desk lamp glowed warm against the silver badge resting in the corner, a loyal witness. I plugged in the hard drive and backed everything up twice, one copy at home, another to an anonymous cloud. I named the folder Legacy_version 2. I smiled faintly. Maybe this was the only legacy I'd ever leave behind. Not a speech, but evidence. Before shutting down the laptop, I opened my old work log. On the last page, I wrote a single line in black ink. April 18th, beginning backup of conscience. I closed the notebook, set it beside the cup of tea, and leaned back. Outside, distant thunder rolled, a warning. The storm was coming. But this time, I was ready. The next morning, my phone buzzed, a message from Greg. Got it. Don't do anything else. We'll handle it. I looked at the words and smiled. Those first two, got it, sounded better than any thank you I'd ever received in 30 years. I turned off the phone and looked out the window. The first light of dawn broke through the rain, gleaming over the lake, like metal newly polished, bright, cold, and true. You told me to call when something smelled wrong, I whispered. You never said it had to smell mild. I laughed quietly to myself, a small, dry laugh, carrying peace within it. Outside, the sky brightened. The storm was coming, literally this time, but not to destroy, to cleanse. 3 weeks passed. Long enough for people to think an email had been forgotten, short enough for karma to arrive right on time. I almost forgot that rainy night message myself. Still made tea like always. Still walked around the lake each morning. Still read the papers bragging about companies exceeding first quarter goals, though in my head, all I heard were compressor valves hissing. Monday morning, 8:02, my inbox pinged. A bold subject line appeared. Invitation. Industrial Safety Audit. Northline Systems. I read it twice. Didn't even need to open it to know who sent it. Greg Whitman, Department of Industry. The man I'd called the storm 3 weeks ago. I laughed, not loud. Just one dry ha that startled my cat. They're not inviting me because they care, I whispered. They're inviting me because they're scared. The tea was still hot. I stirred it gently, watching the swirl form a small, dark spiral. Something about that moment felt right. Justice without a judge. I opened the email. The Department of Industry is conducting a routine safety inspection at Northline Systems. We understand you previously supervised operations and may possess relevant technical data. We request your assistance as an independent advisor. Signed, Greg Whitman, Deputy Director, Industrial Safety Division. Short, plain, no decoration. But each word weighed more than the entire morning's business headlines. I leaned back, closed my eyes. I could picture the 15th floor office perfectly. Darren was standing up so fast his tie slipped sideways. A coffee cup tipping, spreading a dark ring across the quarterly report. The young receptionist gripping the phone, voice shaking. The Department of Industry is on the line. I chuckled again. That was quick, I murmured. Sometimes karma really does clock in on time. 3 days later, the inspection began. News spread faster than any internal memo ever could. Northline received the notice at 7:15 in the morning, and by 8, government cars were parked right in front of the lobby. I wasn't there, but I could see it in my head like an old film reel. I'd spent 10 years preparing for those very inspections. I knew the questions, the folders, and, most importantly, the ones they weren't supposed to open. And of course, that's exactly where they started. By afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. A calm, steady male voice I recognized immediately. Margaret? Greg here. Just wanted to say, it looks like your email hit the right spot. The smelliest one? I asked. Exactly. They're tearing through records. Some documents appear altered, and coincidentally, right around when you were dismissed. Coincidence has always been my favorite part of these stories, I said lightly. We may need you to join as an independent expert, Greg continued. The audit team will send an official invitation. But Margaret, yes? Don't talk to anyone at Northline. Stay quiet. You know how to. I'm a specialist in that field. I smiled. That night, I sat back at my desk. The silver hard drive lay still, the lamp's reflection cutting across its surface like a cold moon. I played the file proof_01.wave. Darren's voice filled my headphones. No one will ever check. I turned the volume down. Wrong again, Darren, I whispered. Someone's checking. I powered off the laptop and poured more tea. Cold now, but strong. Truth, even when cooled, still has a scent. The next morning, the local paper ran a headline: Northline Systems, Surprise Audit by Department of Industry. A photo of the headquarters gleaming under a gray sky. A small caption read, Sources say the audit focuses on operational safety procedures. I looked at the picture, smiled faintly. One line, written like it was meant just for me. My phone rang again. Internal North Line number. I wasn't going to answer, but I did. Mrs. Hale? A woman's shaky voice. Janet, former HR. I just wanted to say, they're panicking. Darren's trying to find who leaked the data. I sipped my tea, voice calm as air. And they think it's me? I don't know, but he's questioning everyone who ever worked under you. Good, I said. At least he's finally doing his job. Janet gave a nervous little laugh, half fear, half satisfaction. You're still the same, calm to the point of terrifying. No, Janet, I said. I'm just enjoying the sound of justice. It sounds a lot like paperwork being shuffled, you know? That afternoon, Greg's email arrived. You have been appointed a temporary consultant for the Northline audit. Please report on Wednesday at 9 o'clock, conference room, 5th floor, main headquarters. I read the line, then looked out the window. The sunlight angled through the blinds, scattering into thin golden bars. 30 years at that company, and I'd never been invited to a meeting on the 5th floor. That was the executive's floor, the power floor, the one that now wanted me, not for a signature, but for the truth. I smiled, not a victorious smile, the kind you wear when you've watched the wheel come full circle. That night, before sleeping, I wrote in my notebook, May 12th. They called me back, not to work, to prove I was right. I closed the book, hearing the soft thud. It sounded like the end of 30 years of endurance and the start of something new. The inspection hit suddenly, the kind where no one has time to decide who to blame first. Wednesday, 9:07 in the morning, the audit team walked into Northline headquarters. Gray suits, cold expressions, no introductions needed. Each carried a laptop, a badge, and the same look that said, We're here to see if you're actually alive. Darren Cole wasn't ready for this kind of rehearsal. He appeared in the 15th floor hallway, tie crooked, coffee trembling in his hand. The LED lights reflected off his gelled hair, shining like wax. Who reported this? Who? He shouted, voice cracking. Why didn't anyone know about this sooner? No one answered. The office was silent, except for the printer humming somewhere, spitting out an error log like it was laughing. Darren stormed through the corridor like a hurricane in a tailored suit. His coffee spilled, spreading into dark rings across the wooden table, beautiful in a strange way. Each ring a pulse of panic. Janet, get me the last quarter's operations report. No, make that the one before that. And tell it to delete all temporary data. I don't want anything being misinterpreted. Janet, poor thing, glanced around, voice trembling. Sir, they're in the IT room. What? Darren froze, then bolted down the hall, his tie fluttering behind him like a white flag of surrender. I knew every move even though I wasn't there. Greg texted me by the hour. They found date alterations in the reports. Some deleted emails have been restored. Darren's blaming compliance now. I read each message like watching an old film I already knew by heart. Only this time the audience was allowed to laugh. By noon my phone rang. Internal Northline number. I picked up, unhurried. Darren's voice, tight and shaky, was trying to sound in control. Margaret, it's me. Darren, we need you back. At least temporarily. I took a calm sip of tea. You already had me, remember? You restructured me 3 weeks ago. I know, but the situation is complicated. Complicated, I echoed. I told you that if you kept altering data, the system would collapse. Looks like I was right, wasn't I? He went quiet for a few seconds, maybe biting his lip, maybe hitting his desk. Margaret, this isn't the time. No, it's exactly the time, I said. You're just not used to hearing the truth. I heard a sharp exhale, then a line caught somewhere between pride and desperation. Do you want to come back or not? I smiled. No, Darren, I don't want to come back, but I will show up. There's a difference. Then I hung up. That afternoon, an email arrived from the audit team. We request your presence tomorrow to assist with data verification. Location, North Line Systems, 15th floor conference room. I laughed. The same room where they fired me 3 weeks ago. Now they were inviting me back. Not to end something, but to save it. Karma sure knows how to write a script. The next morning, Northline's building lit up earlier than usual. I arrived on time, dressed in a dark gray suit, the one I once planned to wear for my retirement, if it had ever happened. The old receptionist looked up, stunned. Mrs. Hale? Yes, I smiled. The system still lets me in, right? She scanned my badge. The light blinked green. I grinned. Guess Karma forgot to update your system. She chuckled softly, a hint of satisfaction in her eyes. The 15th floor still smelled of expensive cologne and new plastic. I walked into the meeting room. The air was heavy. 7 people around the table, Darren among them. He looked wrecked. Tie loose, hair a mess, eyes bloodshot. Greg and 2 auditors sat across from him. On the screen, a spreadsheet I recognized immediately, the pressure tank file I'd once warned about. Mrs. Hale, Greg said, smiling. Glad to see you again. Can you confirm this is the original dataset? I stepped closer, pointed to the timestamp column. This is the original, I said clearly because the edited version removed the unit of measurement. Darren cut in. That's a minor mistake. It doesn't affect the calculations. I turned to him, steady. A minor mistake at 3,000 psi can kill someone, Mr. Cole. And the fact that you call it minor, that's the biggest problem this company has. The room went dead quiet. Only the faint hum of the projector filled the air. One of the auditors cleared his throat, breaking the silence. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Every word I spoke was recorded. Every chart displayed was one I'd preserved. I didn't need to argue. The truth spoke for itself. Darren tried to twist it, deflect blame, drag others down with him. But the more he talked, the deeper he sank. Greg said little, just nodded occasionally, letting him dig his own grave. By the end, Darren stood up, voice cracking. You're trying to destroy this company, Margaret. You're bitter because you got fired. I gathered my papers, calm as ever. No, Darren, I'm not destroying anything. I just stopped covering for you. He froze, mouth open, words gone. I walked to the door, opened it, and said without turning around, Be careful when you close the door behind you, Mr. Cole. Sometimes the draft is stronger than you think. The door clicked shut, a sharp sound that echoed down the corridor. Later that afternoon, a message from Janet. He's been asked to surrender system access. The board is in an emergency session. I looked at my phone, set it down, didn't smile, didn't react. Just took a sip of tea, feeling the warmth slide down my throat. That warmth, it felt exactly like justice starting to move. The storm's here, Darren, but sorry for you, it doesn't need wind, it wears a suit. The inspection lasted 3 days. 3 days were enough to strip away every layer of polished paint hiding the truth. They discovered Darren had ignored safety protocols, signing off on faulty pressure units just to meet quarterly targets. If even one of those tanks had exploded, hundreds of night shift workers might never have gone home. The files I had kept, emails, meeting notes, original signatures, now sat neatly in the investigators' hands. Every line, every timestamp had become evidence. No accusations were needed. The truth spoke for itself. On the 3rd afternoon, the board of directors held an emergency meeting. The air was thick as a welding room, hot, suffocating, and heavy with fear. Darren sat at the head of the table, fists clenched, sweat soaking through his collar. The chairman, Mr. Gray, a man who rarely raised his voice, spoke with weight. Mr. Cole, do you understand the accusations against you? Darren tried to keep calm. Just a misunderstanding in procedure. I acted in the company's interest. Interest? Gray's voice turned cold. What kind of interest justifies falsifying pressure reports? No one said a word. The sound of a pen tapping the table was the only thing that moved. Greg presented the investigation summary. Every page turned was a nail in the coffin of Darren's career. When he displayed the comparison between the real and the fake data, silence filled the room. On the screen, the digital signature D, Cole, gleamed like a blade. This, Greg said, is proof he approved non-compliant products. We also have the audio record. Darren's voice echoed through the speakers. Just sign it. No one will ever check. That line, played in front of the board, cut sharper than steel. Mr. Gray set down his pen. Enough. You're suspended effective immediately, pending the final report. Darren tried one last move. I was following prior management orders. No one responded. A female board member finally spoke. What a shame, Mr. Cole. You never realize silence has a price. That sentence was the second blade, not cutting his career this time, but his pride. When I stepped out of the room, Gray called after me. Mrs. Hale. I turned back. For the first time in 30 years, he looked at me without hierarchy, only respect and a trace of fear. Can you help us save this company? He asked, voice unsteady. I smiled. I'm not a savior, Mr. Gray. I'm the consequence. He lowered his head. No one spoke again. The next day, the news broke everywhere. Headline on the financial pages. The silent woman who made Northline bow. Below it, a photo of me stepping out of the building, gray umbrella in hand, hair caught in the wind. A random picture, yet it looked like a movie poster. Reporters asked a dozen questions. Do you feel vindicated? Will you sue? Why did you stay silent for so long? I said just one line, enough for the front page. I wasn't silent out of fear. I was silent because I was recording. That evening, Greg called. You've turned the whole building upside down, Margaret. I laughed. They used to think I was just a relic that glows, he said. The minister is forming a new safety commission. You're on the advisory list. I paused for a few seconds, then replied, Seems silence still carries weight, if you know when to turn the volume up. That night, I sat in my usual chair, tea cooling on the desk. The silver hard drive still rested there, a witness to a lifetime of careful work. I opened it, looking at it like an old friend. It's done, I whispered. We did well. On TV, the evening news still covered the Northline case. Footage showed Darren being escorted to a car, all his confidence drained away. The headline below read, Northline, CEO, suspended amid industrial safety fraud allegations. I turned off the TV. The room was quiet. But this time it was the kind of silence that felt peaceful, not suppressed. I opened my journal and wrote a single line. May 15th. The end of silence. No revenge needed. Just truth speaking. I set the pen down and closed the book. Outside the window, wind moved through the maple trees, the leaves rustling softly like slow applause. The next morning, I received an official envelope from Northline. No longer the word terminated. Instead, it read, Full reinstatement of rights and honors. I didn't smile or cry. I just signed the receipt, tore the envelope, and placed it beside the silver hard drive. 2 pieces of paper, one an ending, one a record. Silent but not erased, I whispered. They called me a relic. Now they display me in the Hall of Honor. I haven't changed at all. They've just started to hear the sound of silence. 6 months later, the storm had passed, leaving behind new offices, new titles, and an old world that had finally learned how to be quiet. Only I remained, standing at the edge, watching life drift as calmly as the lake outside my window. Now I work as an ethics consultant for the Clean Industry Alliance, a coalition of companies that once nearly lost their reputations and are now learning how to survive without deceit. A small office on the shore of Lake Como in St. Paul. No glass elevators, no leather-scented conference rooms, no blinding red performance charts on the walls. Just an oak desk, 2 potted plants, and a window opening to still water. In the mornings, thin fog glides across the lake, slow, unhurried, like the breath of someone who no longer needs to prove anything. The coffee machine clicks softly in the corner each morning. That sound used to annoy me. 30 years in a factory, I only knew the hiss of pressure valves, the clang of metal, the scream of alarms. Peace, back then, was a luxury. Now it's different. That faint tick, tick, sounds like the steady heartbeat of someone who survived. Maybe peace has its own sound, I thought. One October morning, a cream-colored envelope arrived. No one writes letters anymore, so I opened it carefully, with both hands, as if it were something fragile. The first line made me stop. Dear Ms. Hale, if not for you, I'd still be working for a liar. It was from Lena, a young engineer from Northline, the shy girl who used to walk past my office with her head down, afraid to make mistakes. She wrote, I once saw numbers being altered. I wanted to report it, but didn't dare. When I learned you'd kept the evidence for years, I understood. Silence has power, if used at the right moment. Thank you for staying silent at the right time. I read each word slowly. The paper smelled new, the handwriting faintly trembling. She must have written it late at night, with one hand still afraid. I set the letter beside my steaming cup of coffee. The scent of paper and coffee mixed in the air, reminding me of the old conference room where everything once ended with a click. Only this time, I felt light. Funny, I thought. Sometimes peace is louder than chaos. That afternoon, Greg called. His voice was steady as ever, like a pressure gauge. Margaret, the Safety Commission mentioned your name at the ceremony. They're honoring those who helped rebuild ethical standards. I laughed. I thought they hated me. No, he said. Now they're just afraid of you, but the kind of fear that keeps people honest. We stayed quiet for a while. Outside, the sound of small waves brushed against the shore, like the calm heartbeat of a world learning to stop lying. Sometimes I still get internal reports from Northline. The company survived. They changed the leadership and created a new division, production integrity, the same idea I proposed 10 years ago, when everyone laughed. Now they hang my photo in that department, under the words, integrity never expires. It sounds cliché, but when I saw it, I only smiled. Some truths take 30 years to understand. In the late afternoon, I walked along the lake. Sunlight slanted across the water, ducks gliding in a row, calm, as if no factory had ever exploded from greed. A group of students sat on the grass, debating ethics in the age of AI. I chuckled softly. Every generation thinks it's the first to discover the truth, but I don't judge, I just listen. The crunch of gravel under my shoes, the small, real sound that feels more trustworthy than any promise written in a report. That night, I opened the drawer and took out the silver hard drive. It had retired, same as me. I wiped the dust from it and placed a new label. No longer needed. I didn't erase the data. I simply unplugged it and put it away, like setting aside a sword that had fulfilled its duty. Thank you, I whispered. You helped me survive through silence. I opened the window. Night air drifted in, carrying the scent of water and damp leaves. I poured tea and let the room fill with warm yellow light. No alarms, no urgent emails, no follow-up investigation files. Only rising steam and the soft drip of tea against porcelain. 30 years to learn how to work, I thought. 6 months to learn how to be silent. And a lifetime to understand that peace also has a sound. You just have to stay quiet long enough to hear it. One March afternoon, the mailman arrived. The same old man with the wool cap, breathing hard as the wind off the lake pushed against him. Letter for you, from Northline, he said, voice carrying a hint of hesitation. A silver envelope, no sender name, just a cold printed line. Property returned. I took it, feeling the chill spread through my hand. The paper was thick, embossed faintly. Not the sterile kind used in company memos. I opened it. Inside was my old silver employee badge, the one they deactivated the afternoon they fired me. Now it lay still in my palm, reflecting the weak light of the fading sun. Beside it was a small note, just 4 words, "We are sorry." I sat still for a while, not angry, not pleased, just as if someone had returned the key to a house that burned down long ago. I walked outside, following the stone path that led to the lake. The air was cold, the water still, the wind carrying the scent of iron and damp earth, the smell of time. I sat on the wooden bench, watching the lake quietly mirror the sunset. In my palm, the silver badge shimmered softly. I thought of that afternoon when they disabled it, the dry click that echoed in my mind for months. That sound once marked the end of a lifetime's work. Now it was just a memory, small, simple, weightless. I tilted the badge, the light catching it just right, and for a moment I saw my reflection, faint but there. I smiled and whispered, "Still looks fine. Deactivated or not, I still shine." I leaned forward and let the badge fall into the lake. It touched the surface. Click. A tiny sound, barely audible, but I heard it. It sank faster than their excuses ever could, I murmured. Ripples spread outward, slow, delicate, then disappeared. No one saw it. No one recorded it. But I did, and that was enough. I stayed there a little longer, watching the orange hue fade across the water. A pair of ducks glided past, leaving thin ripples that vanished soon after. Like everything else, no matter how big, it all ends the same way, in quiet circles that fade. I took out my phone, opened notes, and typed a few lines. Not a report, not a complaint, just words for myself and whoever comes next. If someone tells you silence is weakness, remember, water is silent, yet it drowns steel. I paused, then added one last line, and sometimes the smallest sound is the biggest ending. I hit save. Click. The sound was warm this time, like a soft door closing behind a finished chapter. That night I went home. The silver hard drive was still in the drawer. I opened it, the screen lit up, all the files still there, silent, tidy, intact. I didn't open them again. Didn't need to. I simply tapped eject. Click. The drive light went dark, disappearing like me, stepping off stage just as the audience finally started listening. I shut the laptop and poured myself some tea. Steam rose, fogging the window pane. Outside, the first snow of the season fell, covering the lake where I'd let the badge go. I closed my eyes, listening to familiar sounds. The pour of tea, the steady ticking of the clock. The wind is slipping through the doorframe, all of it blending into one quiet symphony, the kind made by those who've lived through chaos and finally found peace in the smallest sound. 30 years to understand what work means. One click to understand what freedom feels like. I smiled softly, half amused, half at peace. The light in the room softened, leaving only a pale strip of gold across my face. I sat there, in front of the camera, silent. Hands resting on the old wooden desk. No papers, no laptop. Just me. And the truth that had waited long enough to be heard. "They thought firing me was the end of the story," I said slowly, my voice steady, every word deliberate. "Turns out it was just their beginning." I smiled, not out of triumph, but because I had seen too many people bury themselves inside their own fleeting victories. People think closing a door means the story's over. But for those who collect evidence instead of shouting, that's just the moment the view becomes clear. When they made noise, I recorded. When they wiped their hands clean, I archived. When they laughed, I stayed silent, so the truth could find its own way back. If you've ever been underestimated, replaced, or ignored, remember this: the quiet ones don't disappear. They observe, patiently. I look straight into the lens, not angry, not proud. Just the gaze of someone who finally understood that time is the fairest lawyer in the world. When you're right, all you need is patience. Silence will turn into evidence. I remembered the early days after being fired. People told me, "Don't say anything, or you'll lose everything." They thought I was weak, but I was listening. Silence has its own memory, and truth, if you keep it clean, if you keep it long enough, always finds its way back. Maybe not fast, but certain. I didn't shout. I didn't beg. I just called the right person. One simple act, yet it carried the weight of 30 years in this world. Not everyone who listens is worth speaking to, and not everyone who speaks deserves to be heard. Justice isn't always the sound of a gavel. Sometimes it's the moment you see the person who mocked you bow their head over your words, reading each line, each figure, realizing they were all true. Someone once asked me, "Do you regret it?" Are you angry? I'll admit I was. There were nights I looked at that old photo of me and Thomas, the man who told me, holding on to your principles is a lonely kind of courage, and he was right. I did feel anger, but then I learned something. Anger drags you down. Stillness drags others. I thought about my journey, from the click that deactivated my badge to the click that sent it sinking into the lake, from the silver hard drive hidden in a drawer to the files that made the powerful bow before a screen. People love explosions. I chose the sound of falling. People love proving themselves. I chose to let proof do it for me. Because truth doesn't need to shout, it just needs to last long enough that no one can erase it. I lowered my voice, speaking to whoever might be watching on the other side. To the younger ones, I want to say this. Silence is not surrender. Silence is gathering, preparing, waiting for the right moment to speak, or to hit send. If you're working in a place where honesty is seen as rebellion, don't try to be louder. Be clearer, keep copies, record when you must, back up what they tell you to delete. And when you leave, walk out like a researcher who just finished an experiment, not a loser leaving the field. I paused, hearing the steady tick of the clock. Then I smiled. This world has many ears, but sometimes those ears only listen when there's an attachment. It sounded like a joke, but it was truer than any ethics lecture, because today, justice often arrives in PDF. If you're being replaced, don't fight with noise. Fight with preparation, with evidence, with time, with calm. Don't become an echo. Become the background hum of truth. I took a deep breath and glanced toward the window. The sun was almost gone. The last light slid across the desk, revealing the old scratches carved by years of use. I touched them, as if tracing my own scars. In the end, I said softly, truth doesn't need a microphone. It just needs time, and someone patient enough to wait for it to echo. I smiled, half amused, half serene. If you like stories about quiet revenge, about the strength inside stillness, subscribe, or don't. The next story will find you. I stood, turned off the light. The last glow withdrew from the room, leaving behind a pure kind of silence. Not heavy anymore, but calm, like the sound of water brushing the lake's edge at dawn. The screen went black. White text appeared, one line at a time. Truth doesn't need a microphone. It doesn't need anyone to shout for it. It only needs one person, brave enough not to erase it.